Hey there, future aviators! Welcome to my YouTube channel. I am starting to post lessons that I am preparing for my CFI exam, and there will be a lot of good information. Today, this is first of a trial run, kind of, the lesson that I actually taught to a person, a friend of mine, on aviation communications. We went over how to use it, phraseology, all kinds of details that go into beginning your aviation journey. I didn't go too deep, rather I was helping the person to get comfortable and familiar with how to use radio and the key knowledge that he needs to have to pass the exam. So let's dive right into this and let me know if it's useful. I have made a few corrections and updates since I posted this initially, so this is an updated and improved version with a few mistakes I cut. And on that note, if you find a mistake, please leave me a comment. Any pilot is always learning, and there could be mistakes that I didn't know about. I'll be happy to fix them and improve my own learning. Thanks, and enjoy the class. Objective of the lesson generally is to get a student, you in this case, to comfortably demonstrate basic process of communication. And we'll focus on basics first, with tower and without, because there are nuances. And we'll try to get an overview of more advanced communication, like instrument flight rules, but we'll leave them aside out of practice. So immediate goal is to get you ready for the next flight lesson. Why this is important is to check for typos is my new presentation, is operation is always a risk. Busy towered airport or non-towered fields, radio communications are essential to make the flight safe. It is regulated. There is a pilot glossary, and it's nice to adhere to rules, but at the same time, like my last line, ATC is our friend. Whatever you ask, they'll help. So the intent is to come at it with, they are there to help. Wouldn't stress, wouldn't worry too much. At the same time, do your best to get better. And there are a couple tricks and apps that I will share later. So overall, we'll go over what types of communications they are, because again, breaking this down is pretty important. Some of them you just listen like weather, some of them you actually make a request. How to use it, phraseology, alphabet, required readbacks. There are some readbacks that are mandatory, others are nice to have. Where it's required, certain airspaces, some compliance requirements, what pilot deviation means, for example, where to find frequencies, and transponder, lost comms, and kind of bonus material, how to use flight service station. In my experience, it's hard to get a hold of them, but when you do, they're helpful. Let's jump into this. Should be done in about an hour. So there are, if you separate them in a couple of groups, the first one is weather or ATIS, ASOS, AWOS. Really, you can just call it all weather. ATIS is Air Automated Terminal Information System, gives you some details, not just weather. ASOS is Automated Surface Weather. AWOS is Automated Weather Observation. At the end, just to keep it simple, all of them you dial in, you listen in, you get what you need. Ground and tower, that's when you talk to people, and then you make a request. Ground, you need to get from a fuel station to the runway. Tower, you need your takeoff and landing clearances. And CTAF, the third that you will be using, that's called Common Traffic Advisory Frequency. And that is the no tower airspace where pilots inform each other. And while it's not strictly required by law, it is very highly advised to do that, and there are rules and advisories how to do that. And we'll go over that in a few. Now, the second part is what you probably will not use on your first initial 10, 20, 30 hours of flight. But that's the portion that's good to know. Approach and departure. Bigger airports like Portland, and that is kind of like a help for the tower. If you can't get every plane talking to tower at the same time. So they talk to planes that are good 20, 30 minutes out maybe. But they're definitely approaching an airport or they're leaving airport. If you want to land into Portland, can't recall if we did last time, you can talk to tower and they get a little cranky, but if you talk to approach, that's probably the easier for all process, and approach sets you on the correct path and then hands you over to tower. Again, would you have to use it in nearest future? No. Just keep it in mind. Center, that's even further out. That's the whole US territory is separated in dozen or so areas. There is Seattle Center that covers a lot of Oregon, for example, and they provide radar services to aircraft in cruise. So if you are on a flight plan, IFR especially, and you're flying for hours, you'll be probably talking to center from Seattle, even if you are in Oregon. Again, in the next couple dozen hours of your training, wouldn't worry about this. Probably won't happen. Guard, that's this emergency frequency. There are always people listening to that, and every good pilot is trying to have second radio tuned to 121.5 to monitor emergency. That is the same frequency that ELTs, the emergency locator transmitters, transmit onto. Your airplane has a small ELT device that triggers in event of the crash, and it will transmit on the same frequency. Again, good to know. If somebody says guard frequency, what they mean is 121.5. Next one, that's the flight service station, FSS. They can get you all kinds of help. I even call them to ask, do we need to pay for touch and go landings at Portland? They went away, they researched and called us back. So very helpful. Whether even the fuel prices, whatever, they can help. And last, out of those frequencies that you don't have to use, Unicom is a lot of ground services. Whatever there are in the airport, including fuel, they would have a common Unicom frequency. So I keep those two lists separate. The first one, you really have to know how to use it and be comfortable. Second, just know that it exists. For now, you'll get there when you get there later. Takeaway, weather, one big group, tower frequency, that's what you need, right? Tower frequency requests, and then CTAF air-to-air. Okay, I'll pause here for questions. How to use the radio. When you dial in the frequency, first listen for a few seconds, because there could be conversations happening that you may not hear both of them. You will hear the tower, for example, but you will not hear the other plane that may be 50 miles away from you. Then, while you're listening, you think ahead of what you'll say, and then literally speak to yourself. I do it sometimes still. Just when I fly into an unfamiliar airport, maybe that I don't do often, like, hey, Portland Tower, Cessna 123, over Sylvan Hills, inbound for landing. Or like, no, inbound with request. I'm like, okay, no, that doesn't sound well. Or just with request. So when you say to that, suddenly you realize what you had in mind, it doesn't sound that great. So speak it to yourself before transmitting, and then transmit. And the overall format, and I'll go over examples down below, but the overall is who you need, then who you are, then where you are, and then what do you need. with slight deviation that applies to uncontrolled airports as well. So specifically, and I probably should have moved this line up, but this bold in brackets line, for the uncontrolled airports and practice areas, you announce the frequency name because this is a transmit only example. Yeah, and so mostly with the tower, you'd be making a request and they would tell you what to do. But if you are in a practice area, you would just announce for safety reasons your intentions. But good catch. Oops, go back. Okay, so examples. Transmit only. Uncontrolled airspace such as Twin Oaks or practice area. This large area that is called it West Practice, even has the frequency on the VFR charts. Twin Oaks area traffic, that's like who you're talking to in this case. Then Cessna 123 at the fuel pump, taxiing 02, that's your intentions. But one important thing is you do repeat the name of that CTAF. Now that's important because there is a limited number of the frequencies and they overlap. For example, at Twin Oaks, we hear Molino. When somebody is saying Molino, I'm like, yeah, whatever, doesn't apply. So again, you start with the frequency name and then you end with the frequency name. That's this transmit only uncontrolled example.
Mm-hmm.
Request is, again, what you will use is ground tower. And if are you flying out of Pearson?
I'll be flying out of Kelso.
And
that's uncontrolled. No tower.
No tower. Will be easier. So that would be just CTAF frequency. Before taking off, you'll say Kelso area traffic, Cessna 123, at the fuel pump, taxiing for departure, runway, whatever. Kelso area traffic. Now you will be going to bigger airports with tower for practice, and both ground and tower similar. Hillsborough ground, Cessna 123 at the run-up area, requesting taxi 31 left, and we'll go over the alphabet in a second. For the tower, once you are at the runway, Hillsborough Tower, Cessna 123, holding short, 31 left, ready for departure. So again, two main groups of examples, very similar format. Any questions?
In these examples, 1, 2, 3 is the tail number?
Yes.
Okay. I also heard, like, when I looked at some YouTube videos, the pilots would also repeat their tail number at the end of the transmission.
Good question. Let me think about that. You know what it could be when you read back to the tower. You always do that at the end. I think I have it on the next slide. So when tower says Cessna 123, enter left downwind, you read back, enter left downwind Cessna 123. You can say Cessna 123 in the beginning, but typically you do that at the end.
I think that was the case.
That probably was the read back.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. The pilot was given some instructions by the ATC, and they would acknowledge and repeat their tail number at the end. Yeah.
But
okay, cool.
If you find example, let me know. Okay. Let's go. Next one. So now get to phraseology. There is alphabet. I even have a t-shirt with that, so I don't forget. Good to learn. And it becomes second nature. Sometimes if instead of Mike, you use Mary, that's okay. But there'll be someone on the radio thinking, yeah, that guy is still learning. So standard spellings, very important. Numbers, that's a pretty big deal. Numbers have to be spoken one at a time with hundreds or thousands, but you don't say 12,000, you say 1,000. Right? Runway, you don't say runway 31, because when you say 31, there are too many variations of numbers that will get confused over radio. When you say numbers one at a time, there are only 10 numbers. And that's how it's supposed to be. Okay. Also, a couple useful words. Yes is affirmative, no is negative. Received, because sometimes tower will say Cessna 123, altimeter whatever 2992, and it's kind of polite to acknowledge that and just say Roger. And then last but really big one, never be afraid to ask them to repeat. And the word for that is say again. Okay, next one, readbacks. When talking to any controller, certain readbacks will be required. And again, to keep it easy, at the beginning, you might as well repeat it all. The idea, and that's important. That's what you were asking about. It has to end with a call sign. There are a couple hilarious YouTube videos when the guy reads back but does not say his call sign, and tower just keeps asking him again and again to read back with a call sign, 5 or 6 or 7 times. Very strict, very serious, have to end with a call sign. Idea is you generally acknowledge the receipt. If they tell you the wind has changed, 330 at 5, you say Roger. That's it, you heard them. But safety related instructions, and again, I'm trying to keep it simple here. There is a lot of reading that you can get into to be very specific, but high level on the ground, any taxi clearances must read assignments and hold short instructions. When there is a runway or a taxiway in a clearance or a hold short, you read that back always. For the takeoff and landing, again, runway and clearance status. So clearance status, what that means, they can say Cessna join base and do not give you clear to land, or when they say join base, clear to land 310, that's your status, you are clear to land. Again, read that back. The common sense, like keep it very easy at first. Common sense is anything that's safety related, specific instructions, which way you go, land or takeoff, you read that back. But for example, when they talk to you and they say, we have you on the radar, you're 3 miles west of Newburgh VOR, proceed direct base, clear to land. From this whole thing, you don't have to repeat that they have you on the radar. You don't have to repeat that they know where you are. It's like good stuff. But proceed to base, 3-1 left, clear to land, that's important. Similarly, in the air, when you have any altitude assignments or headings or speed, when you have any numbers that are given to you, any instructions, you read that back. When they tell you maintain 3000, heading 330, well, they wouldn't give you any speed in Cessna. Again, that's for bigger planes. You read that back. So that's the read back. There are a couple examples down below. That's it. Let me pause here, see if any questions. Okay, next one. Where is radio required? Because you'd be surprised, it is not required in probably majority of the territory, because majority would be class Echo or Golf. But definitely in any towered airport, which would be at least class Delta, and any controlled airspace, which is Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta. Alpha is above 18,000, you're not flying there anytime soon. Bravo is Seattle, Charlie is Portland, Delta is Hillsborough. All those towered airports, they have a requirement to contact them before you enter the airspace. Now, you can grant certain exceptions, and we'll talk about lost comms, but as a general rule, you talk to the tower before you enter airspace. Otherwise, bad things happen. Now, that's to keep it simple for your immediate next couple of months or maybe years. But if you go into instrument operations, IFR operations, there's a lot of talking and getting clearances and reading backs, but that's further down the line. Special use airspace, if you if you go and try to cross some of the military operation areas or restricted, you can talk to them and get a okay to cross, but most people prefer just to avoid it. If there's a restricted space, screw it, just go around. So again, yes, it's there. Does it happen? Most people don't use it. Flight following, again, not initially, but it's a nice thing to have. It is handled by approach controller. All they do is they will warn you of any other planes in the area at the similar altitudes. It's a nice service, but again, your first 10-20 hours will be flying patterns and small little cross countries with instructor. You won't use it, but that's probably coming your way before instrument. Declaring emergency, obviously, 1 to 1.5 or the nearest tower frequency. That's important. However, and I will literally quiz people on this. What's what's the first thing you do in an emergency?
I've heard there's this guy. His channel is called Pilot Debrief.
Yeah, he's awesome.
He's pretty cool. So he says three things: aviate, navigate,
Right.
and communicate.
Exactly.
So first take controls, and then see where you are, where you're going, and after that yeah. Right.
Yeah. So if you are a couple thousand feet in the air, there's nothing they can do for you anyway. If you are at 12,000 above the clouds and you need help finding directions, then yes, declaring emergency will help. But that's good to have in your mind, because what if you have emergency on your first solo? What do you do? Like, well, it depends how high you are and where you are. So that's hopefully you never get to do that, but keep in mind. Next one, SFRA, Special Flight Rules Area. Pearson Field has one. They're kind of rare, but it's effectively the similar airspace as a controlled. You have to talk to advisory frequency, and sometimes they talk back to you, but you are required to keep the tower in Portland informed on what you're doing in Pearson Field. That's special. And then again, transiting controlled restricted areas or this demilitarized zone, I forgot what AD stands for, won't happen in the first couple dozen hours. Good to know. It will come up on your quiz. You'll be reading the book. You'll get up to speed on the theory, but I wouldn't expect that to be a problem in your initial flying. Now, little comment down below. Uncontrolled airports such as Twin Oaks or even Kelso by law do not require radio comms, and there will be people who are not using radio because they don't have it or because they just don't care. Keep that in mind and keep your eyes open, but everyone is expected to self-announce at all times. Unfortunately, sometimes people do not.
What do you mean people? What do you mean people don't have a radio?
There are actually planes that don't have electrical system at all. Super light, old, antique. Sometimes people carry handheld radio, sometimes they don't. They literally may not have a physical radio. That happens, but very rarely.
Interesting. Okay.
One situation I personally encountered, a paraglider with a motorized power glider. That thing was circling airport and seaside, obviously had no radio.
Yeah, makes sense. So you just visually,
see and avoid. Yep.
Okay.
Have another lesson on the see and avoid techniques as well. Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Cool.
Compliance.
So I have a question about like the airspaces. Controlled airspace. How do you know like So do you look at the map in advance before your flight, so you know where you, if you're gonna enter any airspace, if you're supposed to make communications and stuff like that?
Yes, I may not have this exact, but before every flight, pilot by law is required to get familiar with all pertinent required information for the flight, which includes airports of departure and landing, en route, restrictions, weather, etc., etc. So, unlike when we just take the car for a spin, when you fly, you know exactly where you're going, what happens if you can't land there, what's your alternate airport, what kind of airspaces. That's all part of the pre-flight preparation. But if you haven't thought of getting for flight, again, that's something that I haven't had the luxury when I was learning. What have you been talked about the for flight yet?
Well, I've seen it. Yeah.
Basically, it's a moving map, and you know exactly where you are. It's still booting. You know exactly where you are, which airspaces, what frequencies of airports, everything. It's amazing.
Does it also give you the live traffic
Yes,
information?
as long as you are connected to the internet.
Right.
Uh, for that, there is a different device. I think what do you call it? You can get a ADSB in device that Bluetooth connects to the ForeFlight. What? Карта открылась. So you can see on the ForeFlight, you can see every airspace. If you are connected to ADSB, and you will see traffic, weather. You can look up frequencies. You can build flight plans, estimate distance. It's a couple $100 a year. Very well worth it.
Yeah. I mean, right now when I look at this map, it's just information overload.
That's okay, but again, that's why I'm trying to keep it simple for now. Your first hours will be pretty basic around the airport, but it will become easy and normal when you fly more.
Sounds good.
But good question. A couple words about compliance. Let me see what else is left. Frequency locations, where to get frequency, a little bit transponder, lost comms, yeah, all good stuff. So compliance, in general, most of the time, any ATC, air traffic control directions, are mandatory. And you read back what you received and you execute what you read back. If you need to request a change, that's okay, but you request first, then you change, unless it's a emergency. Pilot in command has authority to deviate for safety or emergency situations. As soon as practical, you would report the reason for deviation to active controller. But if something is broken in an uncontrolled airspace, you should better file that NASA report. And that kind of gets you out of jail for free in certain situations. If, for example, if by mistake you flew into a cloud without a IFR flight plan and somebody will report you later, you reporting that up front as a mistake actually gets you out of jail. But even jail aside, figuratively speaking, if you break the rules, you should self-report. You will not be punished for self-reporting, and it's generally good practice. Now, pilot deviation, that's the most dreaded phrase in aviation. If you are told to stay clear of runway and you taxied onto the runway without clearance, you will hear the phrase, possible pilot deviation, I have a number for you to call. Let me know when you're ready to copy.
I've seen that on YouTube videos.
Yeah, not fun. Okay, what else? Frequency locations. So where you get them? Most, again, and until very recent, for flight aside, most frequencies would be on your sectional. Every airport has the tower frequency, has the weather frequency. Again, that's the tower frequency. The common traffic advisory in this case. That's the basic that you need. With just a paper chart, you can be just fine. Flight service stations frequencies are near nav aids. On any VOR, you'd have a flight service station frequency. Weather towers hit at the airport, and then some other frequencies, like if you look west of Hillsborough, you'll see this west practice area frequency 12275, I believe. But in reality, the moment you have ForeFlight, you never pick up a paper map again. It's all there. But also, depends on the plane, you can have frequencies in avionics. G3X is awesome, but probably not in the basic training airplanes. In the old days, this airport facility directory, I think they call it Green Book. Again, I haven't seen any person actually using that book anymore. And then sometimes temporary frequency assignments in NOTAMs. So there are less frequent, more exotic places where frequencies would appear, but most used, again, sectionals and ForeFlight. Let me know when you're ready.
Yeah, when people go hiking in the mountains, right? Even when they have the devices with GPS and stuff, there's an advice to also carry a paper map always in case. So like even if you have ForeFlight, like should you still have a paper map on board just in case, like your device shuts down, whatever?
I say it's a good idea. Well, and you definitely have to have a backup. The backup can be your phone in addition to the iPad. That's a backup. When I fly, I will put all the relevant frequencies on my knee pad on the paper. That's a backup. Because if you want to use paper chart as a backup, it better be right next to you. So every time you have to take it out and have it accessible, it can't be in your bag, in your baggage compartment. But good question. Yeah, it's a valid, good backup. Is that the only option? No.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I see there are other options too.
Right. Yeah. But definitely you have to have backup. But then again, like let's say something happened, paper blew out of the window, battery ran out. 1 to 1.5 is emergency frequencies. Let's say you remember nothing else. That's the one frequency you really have to remember. And then you just come apologetics like, hey, Cessna 123, I have radio issues or paper issues. Can somebody help me with the frequency of Hillsborough Tower? That's fine. Somebody will probably laugh, but they will help.
All right, sounds good.
Okay, next one. What else? Transponder. Now, somewhat related but similar, but separate from the radio itself. Transponder, in a few short words, is a device that transmits your data out in the wild. That's super simplistic way. Slightly more advanced is there are several modes of transponder, and ADS-B is required since 4 years ago in classes A, B, C, which means Portland, Seattle, and above 10,000 feet. So again, I don't want you to be overwhelmed with exactly what and when. You'll have to learn it. In fact, let me take a break and I'll be back. You read this. So, short summary about transponder. There are several modes and they differ by what they do. Down below, mode A, that's the ancient technology, only transmits a 4-digit code. No location, no plane details, nothing, but that was the basic primary means of identifying planes. In a mode C, the transmission includes pressure, altitude, and then mode S also transmits some aircraft-specific data. Now, what became mandatory since 2020 is ADS-B. It's automatic um, dependent surveillance broadcast. Okay, next one. Lost radio comms. Never happened to me, but this is a scenario that have to be understood and even better yet practiced. If your radio has been silent for too long, you're flying and no one responds to your request, you may have lost radio comms. And the first thing you do is you fly the plane. Second, check the basics, because more often than not, it is either volume or squelch or the headset connector that fell out. Second thing you check is that a correct frequency? If you miss it by 0.1 of a frequency decimal, you won't hear anything. Second, check the squelch. Every radio has a squelch tuning. You should hear the noise. If there is no noise, you're probably not getting the audio. Maybe it's a connector again. Maybe the radio is dead. But you approach this from all different angles while flying the plane. Then try the passenger headset. So you do all that basic troubleshooting. A TX indicator, when you press the button, does a TX indicator come up? And then try maybe second radio. If still nothing, you can try emergency frequency, but probably won't help if radio is dead. Check the system voltage. And then that's all your basic troubleshooting. And then if that all fails, then comes that 77 going to heaven. 76 technical fix. So you lost the comms, you squawk 7600, and that allows air traffic controllers to see that there's a plane that has comms issue. Now, for that, there are scenarios. NORDO, the acronym, is no radio scenario, because like I said, there are actually planes that have zero radios, and towers still have lights, light guns, that help to signal what to do. And the process for that, so let's say you lost the radio, you troubleshoot it, no luck, you find the airport that's practical to land. If it's non-towered, you just proceed with eyes open, enter the traffic pattern and land. That's okay. In the towered airport, you can't just land unless it's an emergency. If you're squawking 7600, you have to use the light guns. Now, if it's emergency, because what I probably should have mentioned is if your power is failing, there could be something else. If you have alternator issues, your engine on most planes will not stop, but you have to consider what else is going wrong in the plane, and that may turn into emergency very quick. If it's an emergency, you squawk 7700 and just land. But if you squawk 76, then you are into this NORDOS scenario. For the towered airport, again, to make the thing simple, you monitor the traffic pattern for other aircraft by all means possible. If you have any GPS or ForeFlights, or just look. Then once you join on a downwind, the scenario is you rock the wings, and tower by now will be watching you, especially if they see the 7600 code. Expect the light gun signal. And again, to make that simple, green is good, red is not good. Every time you are receiving a light gun signals, the only action expected from you is to acknowledge. During the day, rocking the wings. During the night, flashing the lights. And once you see a steady green, you go ahead and land. And I even have this link. Let's check this out. I haven't tried it myself yet. I will. I want to see it. But there are those guys who actually ask the tower to do the light guns, and there how it looks.
Cool.
Fly 8 Mike Alpha, pretty good channel. So I'm going to do the same in Hillsborough, see how it works. That's the lost radio comms. Yeah, let me pause here. Any questions? Because the only other bonus slide is I have on flight service station, and then I will share a couple links. Okay, last but not least, how to use flight service station. A lot of good help is possible with flight service station, especially in the days before ForeFlight. That was very useful. Now, luckily, we have ForeFlight, and most things can be just done with ForeFlight. But um, you can get weather briefing, flight plan filing, and closing and opening for VFR flights. When you contact them, you tell them who you are with the aircraft details and where you're flying to. They don't care much where exactly you are, but if you want to get weather briefing, you tell them you're flying to Scapus or Yakima, and they'll give you weather briefing. In flight, you can open close VFR flight plan. You can get more updates on the weather, specific PIREPs, the pilot reports. If you want to navigate around the weather, you can file your own pilot report with Flight Service Station. And literally almost any flight related question, they will probably help. They have one key frequency, 122.2, very common, works in a lot of places, but also has remote outlets listed on VFR charts, including those around VORs. It's a good thing to practice, but I have to say it's not as common as it used to be. And last but not least, couple links. The plain English ARC map, awesome. Even the free version is amazing. Use it. Another similar app is ATSIM, at least for iPhone. YouTube has a lot of recordings plus this liveatc.net. It's kind of hard to filter through all the noise. If you have all day, you can sit and listen, but otherwise, you need to find something that's already filtered and has a teachable moment. And talking about X-Plane Simulator, that sim service, you can connect X-Plane to that sim and get real people giving you real directions. Costs a little bit of money, but you can actually talk to a simulated air traffic controller inside a simulator.
Well, hope you enjoyed it. And as I was teaching, I had a question on, well, it's all great. What headset do I buy? So I adding this bonus slide to the file. There is a wide range of prices. You can go dirt cheap from China, or at the highest end, you can go with the Bose A30 with noise cancellation. It really depends on your budget. Of course, you get what you pay for, and noise cancellation by itself is a great feature. Myself, I have a Sierra, a Lightspeed Sierra headset, the one that's a $699 on the slide. It is great, really no complaints. I'm not sure if Bose would be twice better, but it is almost twice more expensive. Now, on the cheapest side, the David Clark headsets historically been very reliable and known and used, and they're just good for the money. They're good enough. I have one of those. I haven't personally tried the cheaper that Sigtronics one, but if Sportis is selling them, they're probably worth a try. At your initial private pilot training, you wouldn't have to rely a whole lot on communicating unless you fly out of class Bravo, of course, or Charlie. But when you go further, when you start learning the instrument rating, communication will become critical. At the same time, you typically need more than one headset for your passengers anyway. So my advice, start low and then upgrade when the time comes. Thanks again for watching till the very end. Hopefully this little bonus is useful. The prices are as of today, December 2024. I'd be curious to see this video 10 years later, how the prices change. Stay well, safe flights, and I'll see you on my channel.